Have you been wanting to buy multifamily but just don't know how to get your first deal? Well, today I'm going to break this down for you and show you exactly step by step what you need to do to get your first multifamily property. All right, so I've just jotted down some notes here, right? Step by step, again, trying to make it super simple. So how do you find a deal? One of the best methods first is to talk with real estate agents, brokers, right? In your local market, there's a ton of real estate agents that are selling, and representing clients on these types of transactions. So that's obviously the easiest and the first place I would start. Is start networking with real estate brokers, getting the word out that you're trying to buy multifamily, that you're interested, right? And they'll start sending you deals as they get them. A lot of times they're off market, sometimes they're on the market, doesn't matter. You want to start getting these deals brought to you, and so you can start learning the numbers and learning how to underwrite and analyze these types of properties. Next, obviously you can network with wholesalers, and there's obviously direct to seller marketing you can do. I've done a lot of videos on, driving for dollars, direct mail. There's tons of different ways you can market to sellers. A lot of them are free, doesn't require a lot of capital to do. Knocking doors, again, going to networking events, meetups, things like that. So you can start doing things in a very inexpensive way to start sourcing off-market deals. So let's assume in this example that you've found a deal. Now what do? You're gonna have to start running some of the numbers. So first thing you're gonna collect, if you can, from the seller or from the real estate agent, if they brought you the deal, is some of the financials. Talking about financials on a multifamily property, we wanna see how this property has been operating over time, okay? That's gonna give you a snapshot of how vacant it is, what kind of rents they're collecting, what sort of expenses they're using, everything like that. A lot of that will include the rent roll, which basically is just a list of all of the units in the property, how many units there are, what each one rents for, who the tenant is, when the leases expire. So that's what a rent roll is. It's just a snapshot of each unit and what they're currently collecting in rents, okay? Then you're gonna wanna collect a T12 if the seller has it. This is an acronym for the trailing 12-month financials. So it's basically looking 12 months in the past how this property has operated. And that, again, that includes all of the expenses the owner's been investing into the property or has on the property, all of the income, taxes, insurance, everything like that. So all of the financials of the property. If they have that, great. Sometimes sellers don't have it, that's no big deal. And then you're gonna wanna build a pro forma. That's basically our analysis of how the property is going to perform in the future. So it's important to understand how it's been operating, but that's not necessarily how it's going to continue operating, right? When we buy properties, we obviously want to improve the property. We're targeting value add properties, right? Properties that may be distressed, that may be renting for lower rents than the current market value for whatever reason. Maybe they're run down, maybe the owner just hasn't maintained them well, hasn't raised rents over the years. You'll see the gamut of property types. I have an entire video dedicated to running a pro forma, to running the numbers on a multifamily property. Now, this can get daunting and it can seem overwhelming. And there's a lot of spreadsheets out there, a lot of gurus that have all these different models. They use spreadsheets with multiple tabs and it can get very complicated. Well, we use a very simple formula, a very simple model that is literally just plugging in some key numbers and it'll spit out the numbers for you. So you'll want to watch that video. In this example, we've run the numbers on this property. Again, we're talking about a hypothetical 10-unit apartment complex. So nothing huge, something simple. And we feel like, hey, this is a good deal. This price makes sense. The numbers seem to check out. Well, the next thing you got to think about is funding the deal. How are you going to get funds to buy this property? Let's assume it's a $1 million purchase price, okay? We're talking about $100,000 a door here. I got to come up with $1 million. What do I do? So first thing you can look at is partnering. And that's what I would always suggest to the newer investor is bring on a partner. Don't try and do this by yourself because A, it's daunting and you may not know what to do. And B, you probably don't have the funds that you need right off the bat to buy this type of property or even a larger property, right? The more, the more units, the higher the dollar amount. So we love partnering with people with money, with investors, using other people's money to fund deals. Partnership structure. So this is on a multifamily property. This is sometimes how we partner and structure our deals. Now, this isn't the only way. Now, the beauty about this and about this business is that it's up to your creativity of how you structure a deal. You can do it in a million different ways. You can do seller financing, creative financing, you can get second position liens. I mean, there's so many different ways to structure a deal, but this is a very simple way to do it and a very common way to do it in multifamily projects, okay? So what we talk about first is we would probably offer one of our partners or one of our investors that's gonna bring the money to the table, a 6 to 8% pref or preferred return. It's saying we're gonna pay that investor first up to an 8% or 6 to 8% preferred return before we make any money. Before anyone gets paid anything on this deal, they are gonna get a certain return on their money. And I'll show you how this kind of breaks down in the example below, okay? And then on top of that, you can come up with an equity split, like who owns what percentage of the property. So you can do a 50-50 split with the investor, or you can do a 20-80 split, 70-30, 60-40. I mean, the sky's the limit. Like I said, there's no norm. And it will kind of depend on the split based off the returns that investor is going to get. And again, if you're going to bring on outside money from an investor, you're going to want to give them or be able to provide them an IRR or a target IRR, which stands for internal rate of return. Don't lose me here because this can get complicated, but there's a formula that basically calculates their overall return on this project for however many years you own the project, okay? It's just a simple formula that again, the pro forma, the calculator plugs in and calculates. But we want to target a 15 to 20% IRR, 15 to 20% overall return on the project. If you're in that range and this project can justify that, that type of return, then it's probably a good deal. If you're looking at returns, best case scenario of 5 to 10%, I would be a little weary of going into that deal. It probably says, hey, this best case scenario, if we get the rents to where they need to be, if this is operating optimally, if we're only getting a 5% return, I can almost guarantee you're not going to be able to raise money for that from an investor. No investor would want to touch it. And it's probably not a deal you'd want to do. So it's a good target, and the model shows you how that's all calculated, okay? But we want to target a 15 to 20% overall return on the money that you raise or that you invest. If it's your own money you're investing, I would still target the same types of returns. The next thing you want to look at is getting a bank loan for the difference, right? Obviously, you don't want to just buy this property cash. Now you can do that, but your returns are going to be a lot lower because you have a lot more cash out of pocket. We always like to leverage debt, leverage a bank's loan because the banks want to lend you money, right? That's why they're in business. That's what keeps them in business. And B, you can typically get a very good interest rate. Now rates, they rise and they're volatile right now in the market, but right now rates are extremely low. They're in the mid 3% up to 4% range, which is really cheap, okay? So I would try and leverage as much money as you possibly can from a bank. Now on a commercial loan, on a multi-unit property like this, a bank's typically gonna lend you anywhere from 70 to 75% loan on the deal. And you're gonna have to bring, again, 25% down. And I'll break this down in the example here below, but that's kind of the metric. Those are the numbers you wanna use and that a bank is gonna use when they're looking at analyzing a deal and lending you money on that deal. Once you've kind of got your partnership structure, you've got your lending lined up, and you're comfortable with that, well, obviously you're gonna have to do some due diligence on the property itself. You have to determine if this is actually a good property, if it's there's not built over a sinkhole, or there hasn't been extensive fire damage or structural issues, right? So that's gonna require an inspection. You can get obviously an inspector out to inspect the property. So there will be some upfront costs to doing all of this. But again, if you bring in outside money, if you don't have the money to do that, your investor can bring those funds to the table. I would highly recommend you do an inspection, get an inspector through the property, every single unit. You wanna inspect them very thoroughly, make sure you know what you're getting into, you know what costs are involved if there's any renovations needed. So again, don't go into this alone thinking you have to figure it all out on your own. Okay, that's the worst thing I see in investors, new investors do, is that they think they have to be an expert in all things. Well, you don't. You have to know how to leverage the experience and expertise of others. Even if you don't know how to use a pro forma or how to build it, honestly, a good property manager can basically do that for you. They can tell you what the expenses are gonna be, what your rents are gonna be, your averages, all that stuff, so you kind of have a clear picture. So I'd utilize highly a local property manager in that market. During your due diligence period, have a contractor walk through all those units with you and line item exactly what needs to be done, what the bid is, get multiple bids, things like that. So assuming you get through your due diligence, everything's good, then the title company or the attorney, and depending what state you live in, is gonna set up the closing, and that's where you go sign the paperwork, okay? Now, this is obviously a very simplified version of the process, but it just kind of goes through and shows you step by step. So let's run through the numbers of a hypothetical deal, okay? So let's imagine we got this 10-unit apartment and the purchase price is $1 million. In our example here, if we're gonna get a bank loan that's gonna pay 75% of that purchase price, then that means we have to come up with a 25% down payment or $250,000. If you don't have that capital, you can go raise that money from an investor. Again, nowadays, raising money is one of the easier steps in this whole process. Finding a good deal is the hardest thing right now. So let's assume we raise money from an investor who's gonna put up $250,000 of their own money. Great. Okay, well, let's look at some of the numbers of the property. Let's assume each of those units rents for $500 a month. 500 times 10 units times 12 months, that gives us a gross annual rents of $60,000. Well, we have to take out our expenses, right? We've talked about that. And again, you can have a property manager help you determine exactly what those expenses are gonna be, but we typically underwrite and analyze our deals based off of a 40 to 50% expense ratio. So we're talking about all of the costs associated with running that property, okay? Now, again, people will tell you, oh, no, well, the owner, he's only running it at a 25% expense ratio. His costs are super low. I don't buy it, okay? First of all, I don't buy it, and I would never run my numbers based on a lower number than that, because that's where you get into hot water, because things always cost more than you think. They always take longer than you think. Costs go up over time, you know, all of these things. So we always underwrite very conservatively at a 40 to 50%. Now that's a big gap there, but if it's a larger property with a lot of amenities, like let's say this is a 100-unit apartment complex with a pool and a workout room, you can see how costs are gonna be a lot higher on that type of property to maintain a lot of those common area things like a pool and playground equipment, things like that, right? So depending on the size of the property, that's why we have kind of a range there. But on this example, I went off of a 40% expense ratio. So of that $60,000, we're gonna take out $24,000 annually for expenses. Those are just gone. So that gives us a net rents of $36,000, okay? Okay, well now we have to talk about how we're gonna pay our investor, right? We've talked about the 8% preferred return. So if he or she's put up $250,000 of their own money, we're gonna have to pay them annually an 8% preferred return of $20,000. So that basically says, hey, we're gonna collect $36,000 in rents, but before we pay ourselves anything, we're gonna pay you, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, for helping fund this deal. So again, they're getting that return right off the top. So it's almost like another expense, okay? You almost wanna treat it like that. It's an expense that goes right to the investor to pay them first. So after we pay that investor, and again, that typically it's paid monthly or quarterly, is when we typically pay out those returns to the investor off the cash flow. Then we have basically net cash flow every year after all expenses, after the preferred return of $16,000 annually, or that breaks down to about $1,300 a month in net revenue. People ask me this all the time, well, $1,300 a month, that's not that much. True, that's not. But remember how much money you have invested in this deal. Zero. Hypothetically, we've raised all of that money from someone else. So if you didn't have to put any of your own money into this deal, would you accept a $1,300 a month payment? I would. We haven't even calculated into this the time that you hold this property and the appreciation, the tax benefits. There's so much more that goes into a property and the benefits of owning these types of deals. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. I just kind of want to show you, as if you were buying your first deal and kind of some of the things to look for, some of the numbers to run, what kind of questions to ask, what kind of resources you need to reach out to, property managers, contractors, lenders, things like that. So this is a good starting point. And if you have more questions with each of these, I've made videos that kind of breaks these down in more detail. So hopefully that can help you understand how to really start looking at your first deal and have the confidence and courage to go out and take that next step to go buy that deal. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hopefully this video provided some value to you. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. We have a lot of more videos on how to run numbers on multifamilies, how to source deals, etc. And remember, if not now, then when? And if not you, then who? Thanks for watching. Hey, if you feel like you don't know where to start or how to find deals, I've created a multifamily marketing system to help you generate off-market seller leads. This also includes the scripts that I use, actual recorded calls with sellers, and case study archives. And as a bonus, I'll throw in a masterclass on how to find deals straight off the MLS. So click the link below in the description to go ahead and get started.